What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're looking at the top 10 best beginner gods to play in Smite. And by beginner gods, I mean gods that are relatively easy to play, but will also teach you like the basic mechanics and strategies of the game. This isn't necessarily a list of the 10 easiest gods to play, but it's more of a list of the 10 gods that will help you improve as a player. Since a lot of the starter gods are either not that good or are so easy they don't really teach you much how to play the game properly, I thought I'd make my own list. And to make this video useful for all types of players, I'll be doing 2 gods for each class in the game, so no matter what class you like, there'll be something useful for you in the video. But anyway, let's get right into it with number 10. So first up we're covering warriors. The first warrior I recommend to new players will be Sun Wukong. I picked him for a couple of reasons. For starters, he's really easy to pick up, and in general his abilities are quite simple. Like the 1 and 2 are just basic damage abilities that are pretty hard to miss with some CC on the 2, and his ultimate makes him really safe with the healing, CC immunity and a bit of mobility. But Wukong is a really good pick also because of his 3. While it's not like the most complicated ability in the game, it does have some depth to it with choosing different forms for different situations, and has some pretty powerful CC with the Ox and Tiger form for setup. Not to mention even more safety with the bird to get out if you mess up or anything, which new players do. Overall, he's pretty simple, but he does have some depth that can teach you about the basic mechanics of the game like CC, mobility and skill shots, which is why he's a pick from my list. The second warrior I've put on the list is BELLONA. Now just hear me out before you go on a rant saying she's too complicated for new players. Just because she swaps weapons doesn't mean she's that difficult to grasp. She's kind of a step up in difficulty from Wukong if you want to try something more complex for your warrior, but what I like about BELLONA in terms of new players is that her abilities are fairly complex, but they're also pretty easy to hit. The ultimate is near impossible to miss, same with the 1 and 3 really. Bludgeon adds some pretty testing skill shots into the mix if the enemy's trying to dodge and stuff, but basically, BELLONA's great for teaching a lot of the essential game mechanics without being too difficult to play at a basic level. Next we'll cover some mages. The first mage on my list is Agni, the reason being that he's both easy to play and hard to master at the same time. His abilities at their most basic form are really easy to use and pretty easy to hit reliably. He also has some decent mobility as well to keep him safe if your positioning isn't the best on mages. He also has some depth to his kit with the way Noxious Fumes interacts with the rest of his kit, which gives him some good progression and you're like a feeling that you're actually getting better at the god. His ultimate is also pretty forgiving, as if you miss one shot of it, it's only a 20-second cooldown, not 90 seconds like most mage ultimates, and you also have 2 more bombs to follow up if you need to if you miss one. Plus, Agni is one of the few gods in the game that's rarely changed too much, as his kit's naturally pretty easy to balance, so there's less worrying about him getting nerfed into the ground compared with other mages. Poseidon is the second mage I'd recommend. His kit is really simple, probably due to him being quite an old god, but he has a lot of combo potential which teaches you a lot about how mages play in Smite for the most part. He's got really good burst damage and wave clear so you can get ahead early on and blow people up. He doesn't have true mobility, but he does have a lot of movement speed in the passive and the 2 which can help you get away. I think the main reason I put Poseidon on the list though is his ultimate. That combo with his other abilities teaches you a lot about how mages should play, and that can transfer to more difficult gods later on. Okay, moving on to hunters. First up I've put Neith. This is the first starter god I've actually put on the list, but she's actually a very good choice for beginners for a few reasons. Firstly, her abilities are super simple and fairly easy to hit as well. She's also good with both abilities and basic attacks, which teaches you to use both types of damage effectively as a hunter. She has some sustain and decent mobility as well to keep her safe, and some good CC for the most part. While backflip is pretty easy to chase if you know what you're doing, against newer players it's actually a pretty damn effective escape if you can land the slow. The ultimate is one thing that I don't like on Neith in terms of it being new player friendly. Some of the people who pick her up realise its potential and use it right, but a lot of the time people either just fire it for no reason or use it to secure kills, which isn't a bad use for it, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't really teach you how to properly play the god, but other than that she's a pretty good starter god for hunter players. The other hunter I'd recommend is RAMA. Partly because I wanted 1 ability hunter and 1 auto attack hunter on the list to cover both types, but also because he's actually really good for teaching new players the basic mechanics of ADC. His 1 and his 2 both incentivize hitting auto attacks reliably, and his 3 gives you some decent safety. The ultimate, while difficult to hit sometimes, provides plenty of room for skill growth and just feels awesome to use, which is pretty important for new players. Okay, moving on to assassins. Another starter god is first up, THOR. I think THOR is probably one of the better starter gods in terms of being really simple to learn, but a decent amount of room for improvement. He has a lot of mobility, making him pretty easy to chase and get out with. He's a really combo-centric god as well, which teaches you a lot about the value of chaining abilities together for a better effect than using them alone. He has good poke as well as decent burst damage as well, and pretty high base damage values, so even if you fall behind a bit, you can build some defense and just work off his high base damages. This one's similar to Agni in the fact that he's super easy to pick up, and you could probably get the hang of him in 1 game, but he's got a pretty high skill ceiling as well, so you can learn a lot playing him. Plus it probably helps that a lot of people know him before actually coming to Smite. And the other assassin I chose was Fenrir. Similar to Thor, he has good mobility, meaning that you can go for that true assassin playstyle, diving in and getting out, whilst having a fallback if you mess up. The runes on his passive teach you the importance of actually paying attention to your passives, as it's essential for Fenrir's CC outside of his ult. He also has decent sustain as well with his 2, and his 3 is surprisingly good against inexperienced players who don't know how to counter it. Not to mention his ultimate is great setup in fights with like a mage or something, and he's overall just a pretty straightforward god that's especially good against inexperienced players. And finally, Guardians. Firstly, Athena. In a similar vein to Thor, her abilities on their own are pretty simple, but the way you use them is critical to success on Athena. Her taunt is easily one of the best CC abilities in the game and feels really amazing to land in a teamfight. Plus the short cooldown with it being a basic ability makes it less punishing if you misuse it once, compared to like a lot of support CC which are ultimates on a much longer cooldown. She also does have half decent damage early on, meaning you can feel more impactful on her than some other supports. And she also has the ultimate that teaches you the importance of global ultimates and mobility in Smite, and once again feels really satisfying to use. She also has really great room for improvement as well, with some nuances in her kit that aren't immediately apparent when you first play her, so there's some progression for new players picking her up for the first time. The second Guardian I'd recommend for new players is Kumbhakana. He has a really simple yet effective kit that's easy to pick up basically by just reading the abilities. While I do think he lacks somewhat in room for growth, he's great to pick up for players new to Guardians as well. He can like fill the true support role while also being capable of dealing a decent bit of damage as well. Not to mention the passive is great for a new player, as it can sometimes save your life if you misplay. The ultimate is also a great setup as well, teaching you the power of comboing abilities with your teammates properly, even if it might incite a little bit of trolling from time to time. He's overall just one of the more simple to play Guardians, which is the main reason he's on my list. Anyway, that closes out the list of my personal recommendations for beginner gods for each class. Let me know what you think and recommend any other gods you think are good for new players in the comments. There are certainly more, but I wanted to keep it to 10 for the video. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out, nerds.